Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking all about all of the books that I read in January. So January was a pretty good reading month for me. I read 5 books in all, and while that's not a ton of books, I'm really happy with that because all the books that I read I actually really enjoyed. So it was a really good start off to 2020 for me. So the first book that I'm going to be talking about kind of fits into my goal that I have to read more translated literature just in general, but I would also like to specifically focus in on translated Japanese literature as well. I've seen this book floating around a lot on Instagram, and so I had been really looking forward to reading it. I knew that with the start of a new year, I kind of wanted something that I thought was going to be quick and really enjoyable, just to kind of get me going, and this turned out to be the perfect read for that. So this first book is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. Now this book is a bit of magical realism set in a little coffee shop cafe in Tokyo. Within this little coffee shop, we have one particularly special seat. In this little seat, you can actually travel back in time with a few rules. The first rule being that you can only stay back in time until your coffee gets cold. Some of the other rules include whatever you do, it will not change the future, and you can only stay seated in that spot while you have traveled back in time, which means that whoever you plan on visiting had to have visited the cafe at some point, and you need to know the exact day and time that they did so. This is a very quick read. It consists of 4 chapters, each kind of like its own little short story that weaves together. Some of our main characters are the owner of the cafe, as well as the various employees, and then a number of their regular customers that come through. So each chapter focuses on a different character, and they all kind of have their own little story and problem, heartache, difficulty that they are trying to resolve in some sort of way. I feel like this book is a little tricky to describe because on one hand, when I think of it, I think that it's just like a really cute, lighthearted book, but all of these characters, they have really sad reasons for wanting to go back through time. So there are really sad aspects of the book as well. So it's cute, it's lighthearted, but it's also very sad. Some of the themes covered are the difficulties of being vulnerable with another person. It deals with one's sense of duty to one's family, and also what it means to love someone sacrificially. I really enjoyed it. It was a really fun, cute little book to read. There was a couple of moments where there was a little bit of awkwardness, I think, in the translation, but overall it was really enjoyable, and those moments were very few and far between. So definitely check this out if you're looking for a fun, little magical book of people trying to set things right. So the way generally I like to read is I like to have one physical book that I'm reading, but then I also like to have one ebook that I read on my Kindle at night. I just don't really like holding books in bed, especially when they're chunkier. So this next book that I read, I wasn't planning on reading necessarily, but I was looking for something through my library to borrow through the Libby app, and a lot of the books that I had wanted to read weren't necessarily available yet, and I came across this book and it just sounded really good, so I decided to check it out, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. This book is Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys, and this is historical fiction set in World War II. Like I said in my January TBR, the market of historical fiction World War II novels is pretty saturated, but what I liked about this book is that I feel like it covered a slightly different area of World War II that at least I, up until this point, haven't read a story on. Our story centers around a group of refugees who are trying to flee from the invading Russians during World War II. We follow 4 main characters. 3 of them are delightful and lovable and just so wonderful. The first is a young Lithuanian nurse. The second is a teenage girl who has been separated from her family. The third is a Prussian soldier in the German army who is actually just fed up with what the Nazis are doing, and he's trying to flee. He's trying to flee from the Nazi army. Our 4th point of view is really interesting because this isn't a character that you would love, but it does kind of make for a really balanced kind of complex story. And this fourth point of view is that of a young Nazi soldier who is really trying to make much of himself, and he's very much bought into all of the Nazi ideals. One thing that I really liked about this book is that each chapter is pretty short, but it covers the scene really quickly and effectively. I felt like it kept things very fast paced, and you switch back and forth between each point of view, oftentimes getting a slight different take on each scene so that you can see kind of how everyone is experiencing similar events. She also just wrote some really great characters that were equally lovable and despicable. So definitely check this book out if you're looking for a slightly different kind of World War II novel. All right, the third book on my list, again, kind of ties in with my goal of reading more Japanese literature, although this is a little bit different in that this book is written by a Japanese author who chose to write their book in English. This book is Inheritors by Asako Serizawa. So this is a very grand, large-scale, multi-generational story about various different family members covering the span of about 150 years. It deals with the traumas of war, centering around the Pacific side of World War II. So we're primarily in Japan, but we also get a little bit of the story in the US and a teensy bit in China as well. Each chapter focuses on a different family member, and for the most part, we only get one chapter per family member, though there are a couple of repeats, and I really love the way the author kind of tied and wove together all of these different stories. The chapters are not chronological, which can be a little confusing, but she does have like a really nice little family tree at the beginning of the book that not only shows you how each family member is related to each other, but it also has their chapter titles listed there, and then it also tells you the year or years in which each chapter takes place to kind of help ground you in time. It covers some very heavy topics. I liked that we see Japan in this not only as the oppressed, but also as the oppressor. So we see some of the ways that they really mistreated Koreans and Chinese, for example. It deals with some of the secret experimentation that Japan did during World War II. It deals with the comfort women, and it also covers the difficulty of mixed race marriages in America during this time as well. And also the way that the Japanese were mistreated by the Americans when they occupied Japan after World War II. There's a sense where this was a really fast read for me because I was just so engrossed in the story, but there were certain chapters where I really had to just pause and kind of let it sink in and think through it before I moved on to the next chapter because so much happens. I love this book so much, but the last two chapters for me were not my favorite. They're the only two chapters that are actually set ahead in the future, and I just didn't enjoy those as much. But regardless of how those two chapters were, I felt like the whole rest of the book was amazing. It was so beautiful, and it was totally worth it. Check this book out if you're looking for a big, grand, sweeping tale about a family that explores grief and trauma. All right, so the last two books on my list, I'm not going to talk about that much because I already did individual book reviews for both of them. But the fourth book is The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy, and it is a kind of classical fantasy tale centered around a young boy named Fitz, who is the illegitimate child of the heir to the throne. So we follow young Fitz as he's just trying to find his place in the world. And the last book that I read this month was Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This is a really fun kind of modern fantasy tale that is a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. We follow three main characters in this book, all of them female, all very strong and courageous, just trying to better their lives in some way and to really just care for the different family members around them. It was a really fun and exciting read. I love the way that she took the various different elements of Rumpelstiltskin and spread it throughout the story. It was very obviously a retelling while also being an entirely fresh, new kind of take on the tale. There were also, so there were two other books that I didn't get to that were on my January TBR, and I just wanted to touch on them briefly. They were Howard's End by E.M. Forster and Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. So I'm pretty good for the most part at like making a list and getting through it and just sticking with my plans for reading, but every now and again I just get very moody, and so that kind of prevented me from getting into Piranesi this month. It was pretty short. I probably could have read it. I had borrowed it from the library. I was so excited about it, and then I don't know, when it came time to it, I just thought, I feel like the mood for this is kind of past, so I'll probably pick up Piranesi, I'm hoping, when fall comes around again, because I think that that mysterious fantasy happy kind of tale will just be perfect once fall comes around. And then Howard's End by Ian Forster, I do still hope to get to. If I have time, I'll maybe get to it this month or maybe in March. But I just didn't have time for that at all. All right, so those are all the books that I read in January. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.